All right, so I went ahead and threw this one out there as a suggestion, and you said you were surprised that it hadn't been done yet by us or this channel or whatever.
Hmm.
So we figured why not? Because it does fall in that category. It was a really, really big deal when it came out. I remember it was such a big deal that the first time we went to see it, it was sold out, and we ended up having to go to the Sum of All Fears instead.
Hmm.
And then eventually, now 18 years, yeah, in 2 years, the first movie will be 20 years old. How does that feel?
And I
It,
was I was working at the theater when it came out.
I was thinking you were. That would have been the year you started, wasn't it?
Yeah,
And
because
nowadays,
I started for Attack of the Clones.
yeah, and nowadays it just kind of exists
Hmm.
with no real fanfare.
I think it makes an appearance on Freeform every once in a while.
And it seems to mostly be known now as a piece of trivia as, did you know James Gunn wrote these?
Yeah,
That's about the most they get brought up for now. And
I would love to see James Gunn tackle this again with like Guardians of the Galaxy style humor.
yeah, because apparently it was supposed to be a little dirtier, and the podhead jokes were supposed to be a bit more prominent, even though they're thinly veiled as it is.
Hmm.
But then Warner Brothers kind of came in and said, "No, we kind of want it to be like strictly for children. If you can do that." And to their credit, I mean, the weed jokes were there when I was 11 when this came out, and I didn't notice them because I just didn't.
Watching it now, how much do they hit you over the head?
Yeah, because there's the flash forward to 2 years later with the steam coming out of the van, and he's saying like, "Oh, we're really, what is it? We're really cooked now," or something.
Talk
Uh,
about toasted.
Toasted. That's it. And
Hmm.
then the whole fact that Isla Fisher's name is Mary Jane, and
Hmm.
when he says like that is my favorite name, I just took it as he was just trying to win her over.
Hmm.
That's all I took that as at 11. So
It's funny because the pot jokes like totally disappear for the sequel.
yeah,
There's other stuff going on in the sequel. Actually, a little spoiler alert, when I went back and rewatched these, I actually found myself enjoying the sequel a little more.
yeah, I had the same experience.
Because the sequel felt more like a send up of what the cartoon was.
Yeah, because that's the thing is you can tell this one's trying to do the self-aware thing
Hmm.
because obviously like we've kind of had a new wave of being self-aware kind of in the I tend to call it the post 21 Jump Street era.
Yeah.
But this one was kind of doing that same thing a little bit, but
Hmm.
it didn't seem very committed to it.
Yeah.
And I was wondering like if this movie just played it totally straight as just like a straight up adaptation of like obviously it would still have the same comedy style that the cartoon had, but would it work as a live action movie if they just completely didn't do the self-aware thing, even as little as they or as effective as they are doing it?
Yeah.
Like would that even work if they tried it?
Hmm.
Do you think?
I don't know.
Because you kind of
It's
gotta have
it's a hard property to take out of animation and do something with it.
yeah, and you've
That's
got
why every other sequel has just lived in animation.
yeah, and you've got all that well almost,
Hmm.
but you also have the whole thing where they're obviously trying to shape it around like I keep wanting to say current 18 years ago, but
Hmm.
like the fact that they're calling out that Daphne was always captured, like when Velma says like and shockingly Daphne's been captured again,
Hmm.
and then there's the whole joke of her trying to not be the damsel in distress and all that, and stuff like that. I guess works,
Hmm.
but I just kind of kept wondering. But at the same time, though, stuff like that was always sort of like you can laugh at the reference of, oh, shockingly, Daphne's been captured again. But then it's immediately followed or, comes after a line like Daphne saying, oh, now I really have a wedgie. And it's like, yes, this is absolutely a kids movie in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way you can see, like, it was sort of like seeing where we would be today with the whole self-awareness is so in now. But then it always immediately contradicts itself with something that's very much 2002. So
Yeah.
I do have to say, though, my favorite moment in that opening scene has to be the reveal of who the ghost actually is. And it's kind of lame when they bring Pamela Anderson into it and they make it a whole thing. Like, Mystery Inc. is pretty much corporate now.
Oh, wait till the sequel.
Yeah.
They have merchandise and shit.
And it's like, that's lame until the guy does it because he wanted Pamela Anderson, and his response is, I'm a lover boy of George Clooney in proportion. It's like that line is very funny. But yeah, and all of this is just leading up to them breaking up for some reason. So
Yeah, we have an end of second act problem at the very beginning of the first act.
Yeah, which basically means you can tell there's like pieces missing by the time we get to the actual second act.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I wanted to mention about like it trying to be sort of a new era, where there's the whole Spooky Island thing, and what they're doing is like the movie doing a parody of what people think cool kids look and sound like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the joke, is that they talk like that.
Yeah.
And the fact that people immediately realize that it's unnatural and something's wrong. But the question is that sometimes they do stuff like Fred calling Velma the Velmster.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, where exactly is the line between them doing it ironically and unironically?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that line is a little blurry.
But you could also take it, I don't take it this way, but you could make the argument that Velma finds it cool because she's a dork.
Yeah. Yeah, because the Velmster thing actually stays in the second movie.
Yeah, she has a necklace that says it.
Yeah. I could maybe go ahead and give it the benefit of the doubt and take it as that, now that you mention it. at least for a little bit. Period, temporarily. Because there is I do kind of like her trying to do the whole it feels like she's the only one that's really devoted to the detective thing when they get there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, truthfully, everybody else is trying to show up the other. And I love that moment where she's trying to interview like the skull-faced guy. So moments like that, but the humor doesn't always work. I vividly remember it working in 2002.
Another scene that you brought up that still kind of cracks me up is when Walmart Michael Ironside comes into the hotel in the restaurant area. Come on, that's what he is. But
You're talking about Magoo?
Yeah. But he comes in and it plays like this big sinister music, and then he just sits down and starts playing piano.
Yeah. And then there's stuff like I love talking about Isla Fisher and how she's like so drawn to Shaggy. It's like, are we never quite sure when she was possessed?
I assume it was in the scene where they split up and she just comes running out of the woods when they're on the four-wheeler. I figured it happened while she was out in the woods.
Yeah, because I was remembering lines like when he goes to the claw machine and she's like, "Oh no, nobody's ever given me a stuffed dismembered head before." And it's like I could never remember if that was her character or if she was possessed by that point. But yeah, what you're saying does make sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way her character is.
Mm-hmm.
because this
When
was
her
our
when her face gets hit by the branch and it rearranges for a minute, there's a tiny bit of nightmare fuel there.
yeah. Especially the moment when her voice goes really deep when she tries to stop Shaggy from going down the hole.
Mm-hmm.
He just doesn't know.
Since we're on the subject of Shaggy, let's talk about how the best thing to come out of these movies is Matthew Lillard.
Yeah, because as far as him doing the voices in the later animated movies, didn't like Casey Kasem pick him personally as like a successor or something?
That I didn't know.
I feel like I've heard that.
I love that these guys all make returns to these characters throughout various episodes of Robot Chicken, too.
Yeah. But yeah, that was one of those cases where it was kind of from out of nowhere because the two things Matthew Lillard was most well known for up to this point were Scream and SLC Punk.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's almost something you could have never foreseen, but then once you see him in the role, it's like, well, yeah, it was never going to go another way.
Mm-hmm.
Fate had our backs on that one.
Mm-hmm.
It was because I read somewhere, and I feel like the dates are a little too close for this to be sure, but I did read once that it was 13 Ghosts that got him the part. I mean, I can get that,
Mm-hmm.
but I wonder how much truth there actually is. I mean, it makes sense. He's dealing with ghosts. He was the comic relief. It's a Warner Brothers movie. It does all add up.
Didn't James Gunn do some work on 13 Ghosts, too? Did I remember seeing that?
I'm not sure, but it wouldn't surprise me. And yeah, because it's one of those things where, because he and Freddie Prinze Jr. were so tight there for a while, like with him, with Lillard being and She's All That and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like you kind of think that was the reason, but it's like I'm not sure which one got here first.
Was Lillard in Summer Catch, too?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they were like attached at the hip there for like the early 2000s.
Yeah, because weren't they both in Wing Commander?
Yes, let us not forget Wing Commander, or we can totally forget Wing Commander, whatever you want to do. And then I heard that they wanted like a real life couple for Fred and Daphne for some reason.
Oh, I thought you were saying that Lillard and Freddie Prinze Jr. wanted to be a real life couple, and I got confused.
I mean, back then, that wouldn't have been, totally out of the realm of possibility.
I think my favorite little piece of trivia for Freddie Prinze Jr. is that for a while he was a writer for WWE.
Yeah, and now he has a cookbook that apparently got really good reviews.
Yeah. I've also heard too that he's a pretty nice guy.
Yeah, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and apparently, when he went like on Friends, remember when he was the male nanny?
Yeah.
And he had his head shaved?
Mm-hmm.
Apparently the reason he had his head shaved in that era was because the blonde guy from playing Fred like fucked his hair up.
Oh, that's funny. I mean, it's funny, but it's not. Like, it sucks to be him, but
it grew back. It's okay. We can laugh about it now.
oh man, it grew back in spades for the sequel.
Yeah, it was almost like in the sequel you can tell he said like, I'm not messing my hair up again. We're using a wig.
Yeah. I know it's hard though because Susan she's always dyed her hair dark and she's dark haired. And I've told her before, I'm like, why don't you go blonde? And she's like, because I have to bleach it to do that. So I could see why his hair might have got messed up.
While we're on the topic, what do you think of his variation of Fred? Because they're obviously... I don't remember the cartoon really playing up a dumb angle on him.
I don't remember him having much personality at all in the cartoon.
Yeah, he was just like a generic leader type.
Yeah.
Like there's the moment when I think it's the second movie when Shaggy starts saying, "Hey, let's split up and you guys do this," and Fred has to say like, "Hey, that's what I do." like he knows it's his only job.
Yeah.
I feel like, as we mentioned before, I feel like the second movie is much more in tune with the cartoon than this first one is.
Yeah.
And the second one kind of cleaned up this one's mess just a little bit in regards to that.
Hmm. I don't
But
know if
I
the
do,
critical reception was any better, but I remember when I rewatched these, I won't lie, I legit enjoyed a lot about the second one.
yeah, I think their critical receptions were about on par.
Hmm.
But yeah, but I do like, some of the ways they play with him being dumb are kind of funny. Like when they're walking around the ride, and Velma says, "Man, the only thing missing is a mindless zombie," and then Fred walks in. there's no, and there's no attention drawn to that. She doesn't say like, "Oh, there's one," or "Oh, speaking of." No, just the punchline is just him walking in, and that's it. And the scene keeps going.
That must have been something that the studio didn't touch that James Gunn did.
Yeah, because there were apparently there was quite a history in regards to the casting of this movie. Because obviously Linda Cardellini and it's interesting because at the risk of sounding, skeevy, it's interesting to cast Linda Cardellini because she's so perfect for the part. It's like Matthew Lillard. It was just like fate had our backs. There was going to be nobody else that had this part.
Hmm.
Yet Linda Cardellini is like hot. So
Yeah.
it's like your mind just would not immediately go there, but then once you're in the costume and the wig, then she was able to bring it to life pretty much perfectly.
Yeah.
And then Sarah Michelle Gellar's Daphne is we pretty much talked about with them kind of trying to do the opposite of what the cartoon was, or trying to update her a little bit.
Which is funny because in the cartoon, I don't remember her having much of a personality either.
Yeah. and
Like the
I
second one, the second one is about Shaggy and Scooby trying to find their place in the gang. Well, to me in the cartoon, Fred and Daphne are the ones out of place because they're so straight laced and serious.
yeah, which is another thing the second movie brings into account, where they're basically saying like Fred's just like the idiot, and he'll occasionally say go here or go there, and Daphne's just like a face,
Yeah.
and like that's like that becomes like conflict in the second movie.
Hmm.
And the whole idea of them wanting a real life couple for Fred and Daphne. Props to Freddie Prinze Jr. and Sarah Michelle Gellar for being a very famous celebrity couple that got married young, and they're still together now.
Yeah.
I would have never seen that going, honestly.
No, and from what I understand, there's like it's a drama free marriage. It's probably just from what I've heard. Freddie Prinze Jr. is a nice guy, from what I've heard.
And apparently they made her life miserable with this shooting, because it was literally shoot 2 weeks of this, shoot 2 weeks of Buffy, shoot 2 weeks of this, and she had to get on a plane each time to do that.
How'd they do the hair thing? Did she wear a wig?
Probably.
Hmm.
When in doubt, they're probably wearing a wig.
Fair enough.
And then while we're on the casting, apparently there were a lot of variations of this,
Hmm.
because I guess this was in development for a long time in like the '90s and kept failing.
Yeah.
Like apparently Kevin Smith had it at one point, which the we jokes would make sense.
Yeah.
Apparently, Jim Carrey was going to be Shaggy, which I'm sure he could have done in his Jim Carrey way, but we really needed Matthew Lillard to make it Shaggy.
Yeah.
And then I guess Jim in the Jim Carrey version, Velma was going to be Sarah Gilbert, which which I can see,
Yeah.
but I don't know, there's just something about this cast that just feels like magic.
Hmm.
Because apparently there was also going to be, this is one that half of it I can really see, half of it I can't see at all. There was going to be a Mike Myers version, and apparently he had it for quite a bit. And I think he was supposed to be Shaggy, possibly Shaggy or Fred. I can't remember. And either way, that
It's
doesn't
Mike
really.
Myers. He could have been doing both.
Yeah, but I kind of just can't see that. Even when he was like really in his prime in the late '90s, with Austin Powers being like right before all of this was going on.
Hmm.
But his Velma was going to be Janine Garofalo, and that I can definitely see.
Yeah,
Honestly, it sounds like in the movies, Linda Cardellini is kind of doing an impression of Janine Garofalo with her voice.
I could see that. You were mentioning this earlier. I would love to see this be redone with the 21 Jump Street crew.
Yeah, you mean like Phil Lord and Chris Miller?
Yeah,
Yeah, they could totally do something with this.
yeah.
Something better than Scoob, I'm sure. But the thing also is that the animated movies,
Uh-huh.
like the animated movies where Matthew Lord's still doing Shaggy,
Mm-hmm.
those like are doing those are like most of those are worthwhile, and they do the self-aware thing really well.
Hmm.
So they're kind of keeping it alive. That's why Scoob is so unnecessary. And of course, like we were saying, we have Matthew Lillard here to kind of keep that going. Also, and the rest of the voice cast also is the same through most of the movies, and they really work also. But another thing in regards to casting, I do want to bring up.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of those things where I really hope it's true. Like you have no idea how much I want this to be true.
Hmm.
So Rowan Atkinson is pretty much the perfect choice for Montevarious, right?
Yeah.
I think it's also kind of a vague reference to Blackadder as well,
Mm-hmm.
that he ends up being the schemer.
Sort
But
of.
something that I heard, and I really, really, oh my god, I hope it's true. I need confirmation on this. Naturally, of course, apparently the first choice for Montevarious was Tim Curry.
Yeah, I totally see that.
Now, why is Tim Curry not in this movie, you might ask? The thing that I heard that I so badly want to be true is the reason Tim Curry turned down this movie was because Scrappy was in it. That's what I heard. I really hope it's true.
I want to see like 70s Tim Curry, like between shots of Rocky Horror Picture Show, sitting there in full Frankenfurter gear in his chair, like between scenes, the Scooby-Doo comes on and Scrappy shows up and he's like, "Oh fuck."
Didn't the cartoon start in like '69?
Yeah.
So this thing is totally plausible. Oh, that always blew my mind as a kid because we watched the show as regularly as we watched any modern cartoon. So it would always blow my mind when I would learn how old the show actually was.
Yeah.
And we even get some old references like the whole random thing about like it's kind of a double joke here. It's a joke where you're like, oh whoa, he said that in this PG movie, but the star of this line is the reference when Scooby's freaking out about the monsters and he hides, and
Mm-hmm.
Fred says, "This is as embarrassing as when you decided to clean your beans at Don Knotts' birthday party."
Mm-hmm.
It's like people kind of get thrown off by the "clean your beans" line, but it's like,
Mm-hmm.
dude, he made a Don Knotts reference. Can we not acknowledge that? Because did they or did they not run into Don Knotts occasionally?
I believe so. They ran into a lot of people. They ran into Batman and Robin. I'm pretty sure they ran into Don Knotts,
The Harlem Globetrotters.
the Harlem Globetrotters. In modern days, they run into WWE wrestlers. They've run into Kiss.
Yeah. That Kiss movie's not bad. And Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes have voices in it, so Kevin Smith is now back in the conversation.
Hmm.
Another side character I'm really into is Miguel A. Nunez Jr.
Yeah.
I love the running joke that he's totally not sinister, but Daphne totally thinks he is. And I love the way they slide that in too, where it's like she's talking about all the different suspects, and she's talking about like Nagu, he's obsessed and he thinks you have this park in like the wrong place in this ancient place, and it's like, and then there's that guy, and he shrewdly tricked me into going to the castle. And it's like, no, he didn't. He was just straight up saying, "Don't go." And
he kind of gets the sequel treatment that Alicia Silverstone does to him.
Yeah. And he's so exasperated after every run-in with them.
Yeah.
We needed more of his character. I would have loved to have seen more of it. Trying to sacrifice the already dead chicken. He was a gold mine of jokes that we didn't really get to see. So, on the topic of what we were talking about with Tim Curry, is it another part of the movie's self-awareness that not only is Scrappy in the movie, but he's the villain of it? Because, I mean, in one case you could say, oh, that's lame, Scrappy's the villain of all things. That's like the lamest thing you can do. But on the other hand, it's like why not make the villain the most hated character in the whole lore, or whatever you want to call it, of this? How do you feel about that?
I mean, it could go either way. I mean, it's kind of hitting the nail on the head. But I mean, at the same time, you could have scrapped. Didn't mean to use that pun there, but you could have taken that idea out, and I don't think anything really would have changed.
Yeah, just have Monteverest be the villain without being a robot.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we get like a whole climax of this movie, and then
or kind of take a page from the second one, and they pull off Monteverest's mask, and it's Miguel A. Nunez Jr.
I would have loved that. that would have been a perfect twist too, because they build it up that he's so not what they think he is.
Yeah.
It's like it would have been a perfect twist. Because he played that exasperation perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love his delivery of when he says, do not go to that castle, and it's a big dramatic moment. She's like, oh, you want me to go to the castle? Did you not just hear what I said? And that's another line, talking about the clean your beans line.
Mm-hmm.
Which is really funny to say over and over. It gets funnier the more it comes out of my mouth. I'm realizing to myself. There's a line that Scrappy says in the flashback that kind of caught me off guard, because I don't know that I had caught it before. He straight up says to Fred, you don't have the scrote for this job. Like, whoa, Scrappy. So it's like, it's weird how this
he was annoying in the cartoon, but they turned him into like a straight up dick.
Yeah. It's like, that's the question, is did the movie make him worse or not? Can he get worse than his previous incarnation or not? And it wasn't so much that I hated Scrappy growing up. I just kind of didn't watch the episodes he was in. Like, if there was an episode with Scrappy in it, I would just like watch something else. And I was
that, and didn't Scooby have a cousin that was like some gray dog or something that wore a hat?
That sounds familiar.
I think he had like a red bucket hat. I don't remember his name.
I don't know. I kind of wish. I like that it's only there once, but I almost feel like there should have been one more payoff to Melvin Boo.
Yeah.
I feel like that was setting up something.
I love the convenience of him being right there whenever he's brought back up.
It's like that's a conflicting thing, because it works either way. I kind of wish he'd had like just one more payoff, but at the same time, it's kind of amazing that he's only there once. It's like, that's enough of that joke. This is a movie that's fun to watch with the DVD commentary.
I've never done that.
Because I think that it's been a long time, but I think it's also they had an appreciation for the Melvin Dew joke. Because this was like one of the first DVDs you had.
Mm-hmm.
And that's around the time I listened to the commentary, so I'm going like way off of a distant memory of this. But the one thing that stuck out, I don't know why, but it stuck out in the DVD commentary, and it's one thing that I still hear in my head every time this scene happens. And it got a big laugh from the cast. The beginning scene with Pamela Anderson and all the fans come running up.
Yeah.
And there's that guy there dressed as Fred, and he's got like the curly hair. And he's like, like, hey, dude, you're handsome or something like that. When it cuts to that curly-haired dude dressed as Fred, on the commentary, Freddie Prinze Jr. just says, hey, look, it's Ryan Phillippe. And it's like, no, every time I see that scene, all I see is Ryan Phillippe in that guy. Wouldn't it for the I Know What You Did Last Summer connection, wouldn't it have been amazing if it actually was?
Yeah. They definitely pull out more celebrities in the second one.
Yeah. Yeah, we got to fit Ruben Studdard in here somehow. And then, yeah, talking about Scrappy, there is the whole thing where there's like clues everywhere that Monteveres is actually him. Like the whole scratching thing is so blatant now.
Yeah. I just don't know how I feel about the fact that they actually brought supernatural elements into it. Like, it doesn't really fit with the show.
Yeah, because that's the charm of the show, is that it was always an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, every time.
Yeah.
I want to say there's like one or two possibly of the new animated movies that does actually go supernatural, but for the most part, they also keep up with it.
Mm-hmm.
That's
just it. Like, you could do a self-aware Scooby-Doo movie in like an actual like centered universe, like in a serious universe. You could do with Scooby-Doo what Nolan did with Batman.
Well, that would be an interesting movie. Well, they kind of do. The animated movie that's centered around the Blue Falcon kind of does the. It has like a whole take on the doing the dark and broody update.
Mm-hmm.
Like that whole movie is like a spoof of that.
Yeah, or you could do like a live action version where like they're so used to people being, and every time they meet a bad guy, they think it's somebody in a mask. I don't know. There was different directions you could have taken. I don't know if it was necessary to bring in actual monsters, which we do in the second one, but at least it's explained through typical Scooby-Doo science babble. That's why I can forgive it.
Yeah, because you know what else makes it annoying? Is when you hear about a live-action Scooby-Doo movie being made through a major studio that basically just feels like nothing more than a product. It's basically just made to sell itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a labor of love by any means whatsoever. Except for surely some intricate details from some people behind the scenes and maybe the cast. But for the most part, as far as a studio is concerned, not a labor of love.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that there's actually monsters in it without them being people in masks is probably the most predictable thing to come out of that scenario.
And what's funny about it is at the end where they tried to introduce a character in a mask, it wasn't necessary.
Yeah, and it went right back into it's
yeah.
He grows and shit.
Yeah.
And then even before that happens, how do they take out the monsters? They stole the disco ball bit from Dusk Till Dawn. Of all the movies to take from for a Scooby-Doo movie.
I do love, though, for being Spooky Island, I love that even the disco ball is committed to being spooky.
I just like that phrasing, committed to being spooky. Oh. So are we pretty much, we've already been doing it, are we pretty much transitioning into the second movie?
I think so.
All right, you were asking, I got to start off with this. You were asking what the critical reception is for these movies and if they were much different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there is Leonard Maltin's physical movie guide that he used to put out.
Mm-hmm.
That would be updated for every year. And it has like a star amount, a cast list, and just a little tiny review just to give you an idea. And it's like every movie you can possibly think of that had a theatrical release.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a very famous review of Monsters Unleashed. To compare, let me compare. You remember this, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
To compare, I will tell you what he said about the first movie, and then I will tell you what he wrote about the second movie.
Okay.
me find it here. Okay, for the first movie, he said Hanna-Barbera's TV cartoon K9 gets the big screen treatment as Scooby and pals try to solve a mystery on Spooky Island. Flat comic whodunit with a computer-generated title character, a mild diversion for kids and older fans of the vintage series. That's what he wrote about the first movie. I shit you not. His review of the second movie is, it is what it is. That's it. It's the star amount, the cast list, and then that one sentence, and then it moves on to the next movie.
What are the star amounts?
They both got 2 out of 4.
Oh, okay.
So he's indifferent.
Okay.
And that's probably where a lot of people land.
Yeah.
But
I think on IMDb they're both in the 5s, I think.
That sounds about right. But as we were both saying, I feel like this one hit the mark a little more.
Mm-hmm.
Like it feels more like it hit a lot of the classic beats of the cartoon without feeling like it was just doing that. Because there's this stupid bit in Scoob where the beginning of the movie is them using their current animation, the way the movie's animated, to completely recreate the opening of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And people creamed their fucking pants over it. It's like, really? They did the laziest possible thing they could do for fan service, and people applauded. It's like, go fuck yourself. But it's like, this movie is able to do those classic things with stuff that's already in movie. Like, I love the bit when they're hiding from the night, and they're putting objects up against the door, and he's already in the room and just handing them objects. That is such a thing from the cartoon.
I also enjoy how, like, the sets for Peter Boyle's house and the mining town and stuff, those all feel like straight out of the cartoon. Like, the set design in this movie is really neat.
Yeah, I love the outside of the castle. Because it's like, it has such that classic vibe. And it shows you, and it's a thing where, like usually that would just be fan service, but it's like the first movie was missing that stuff so much. That's how the first movie actually worked in the second one's favor, is we're so pleased to see this stuff now. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of what we're looking for. They've even got that bit that's definitely right out of the cartoon where it's Shaggy and Scooby are walking, and like the room is entirely dark except for the windows. And every time they walk by a window and they're lit up, they're in like a different position. And the third time they do it, a monster's involved. Like, that's
yeah, that's right out of the cartoon.
It's so perfectly cartoony. And they actually do, like, we kind of get this with just Velma in the first movie a little bit, but there's a lot of like actual detective work in this one too.
Yeah.
For a while, like even that little moment where Fred's like, oh, it's a good thing there's dust on the books, then we'll know what he's been reading lately. It's like, yeah, go Fred.
That's a good call.
And it's like, it's nice to, like I said, it's still not as apparent here as it could be, but significantly more than the first movie. And it's always nice to see it, because that's what a lot of the original show was that there was an actual mystery with actual clues and actual stuff you could put together yourself. And when you throw in the actual, supernatural elements, that all goes away. Because there's no mystery. It just is that thing, and we know that.
Yeah.
That's another problem with Scoob. Is the villain. The villain is Dick Dastardly. That's
the
it.
car driver?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what it is. That's the movie. There's no fucking mystery. There's a whole side plot with Muttley where we think Muttley's dead, but he's not, or some shit.
What? That's it. You made that sound so much more interesting than it sounds like it's portrayed.
It's not interesting. I promise it's not interesting.
So Muttley pretty much was Tim Blake Nelson in this one.
Yeah. Oh, let's talk about Tim Blake Nelson.
Dude, props to Tim Blake Nelson for going to 11 with this role.
In the 30 seconds of screen time he has.
Dude, he makes every second count.
Every second. I like literally Like, literally, every single frame of him is worthwhile. I love the moment when he's like, you can just tell how much fun he's having. The very first shot we get of him, he's doing the come alive thing. And then and then there's that great moment where he's making his escape. It's literally his second moment after the come alive thing.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. It's such a childish joke, and I love it. When he's flying away on his contraption, and he says, "So long, suckers," and then he drops, and it's like, "Help me, suckers!" Then he kept the suckers. I love that.
I got a kick out of that too.
And then what? We see him once on a monitor, and then when he's revealed, and that is Tim Blake Nelson's screen time.
But even after he's revealed, he makes it worth it.
Oh, I remember being like, that was weird to me, because I had seen Oh Brother Where Art Thou a few times by the time this movie came out.
Mm-hmm.
So I was familiar with who he was. And I was so caught off guard that he's in the opening credits.
Mm-hmm.
like crucially, he's like right there with the main cast, and it was like, where the hell is he?
Mm-hmm.
It was like, really? That's it? I was like angry. I was angry at like 13 years old that Tim Blake Nelson wasn't in a movie enough.
Yeah, but now looking back on it and rewatching it, I'm glad he wasn't overexposed.
Yeah, it's funnier that he has that little amount of screen time.
Yeah. And what he does with it.
Because, like, yeah, that whole come alive thing was probably a whole day of shooting. Because that's just how movies work.
Probably. I really like Peter Boyle in this movie, too.
Yeah, he's like the perfect, like, creepy old guy that you're not quite sure whether to suspect him or not.
No, and he's great at being bitter.
Yeah.
Like when Shaggy tries to tell him, he's like, "Oh, so you're thankful for Mystery Inc. then?" And then Peter Boyle just snaps in a Peter Boyle way.
Not even noticing Shaggy's already removed his disguise. I think my favorite Peter Boyle bit in this is when they're going towards the factory or whatever it is.
The bushes?
They're like, what is it?
Is it the bushes?
Yeah. When Shaggy and Scooby are yelling at each other in the bushes, and it's like, how are they not seen? And Peter Boyle just turns around and says, "Oh, the bushes are yelling at me again." It's like the first movie would have never had a moment that funny to cover up something that seemed obvious.
Yeah. It's like the first one tried to take things a little more seriously, and then for the second one, they were like, let's just take the gloves off and go.
It's weird.
And I think it worked to the second one's benefit.
It is weird to kind of say that about the first movie, like it was taking itself seriously. It's like compared to this one, it kind of was.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But there's also just some really good standalone jokes in this one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love the whole idea of the doorbell is a trap. And it's like, before you can even register what could come with that, we see there's a Girl Scout and there's Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
It's like, that's such a great joke. And it's perfect. It's such a perfect setup because, of course, Shaggy and Scooby would buy all of the girls' cookies. Of course they would. And then there's the whole thing where it gets pretty heavy. I feel like it gets a little reliant on the references.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's dying for fans to notice the references.
Yeah.
Like, it almost feels a little desperate at times. But it still works in the sense of stuff like the bar.
Mm-hmm.
Where you can see the neon sign and all of his faces are the different villains from the past, and they're all the ones that use the disguises and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I love the whack-a-mole game that's their faces and their voices.
It's the, I believe it's the designs from the cartoon, too.
Yeah. And the problem, though, is that the movie is not without problems.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty redundant statement, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Because, talking about this bar scene is doing so many things right. The whack-a-mole thing, the references to the villains, Shaggy removing his disguise in front of Peter Boyle without him noticing.
I actually like the name of the bar, too.
Yeah, the faux ghost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll give it to him. It's clever.
But there is one trap that so many kids' movies fall into, and this movie falls balls first into that trap.
The musical number.
When all else fails, a dance scene filler.
Yeah, which is a shame because that bar scene was going so well.
Let's remove our hats and give a moment of silence to how well this bar scene was going prior to the dance scene.
I don't know if we were at Back to the Future 3 levels of bar scene, but it was a pretty good bar scene.
No bar scene is on Back to the Future 3 levels of bar scene. It's in a league of its own. We're talking about other things that are funny as hell. You talked about Alicia Silverstone a little bit ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole idea of the media turning against them is a fun plot. Mm-hmm. Especially the running joke of taking Fred out of context.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because going back and watching it 16 years later, it's a relevant plot thread.
And then there's some things that have been made out of it. One video I directed you to was what is that band's name that was all over Daredevil? And they did Bring Me to Life.
Evanescence.
Yeah. It's about a 30-second clip that somebody put on YouTube. And I looked for it just before we started this video, so I know it's still there. It's the video for Bring Me to Life. And you know how in the chorus, they say, wake me up, and then she sings the chorus.
Mm-hmm.
And in this 30-second clip of the chorus of that song, they have replaced Wake Me Up with the clip of Fred saying Coolsville sucks. And it's one of the greatest things I've ever seen on the internet. Because I felt like that was the scene we took away the most from this movie after we saw it in theaters. That made us laugh for literally years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still funny now. It's never not been funny. If anything, is it getting funnier with Tom? Oh, God. So, then there is, you mentioned them partaking in Robot Chicken.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, Seth Green is in this movie. It was the same year he and Matthew Lillard did Without a Paddle.
Yeah. Seth Green's kind of doing the anti-Miguel A. Nunez Jr., too.
I do love how he's totally normal, and then there's just one scene out of nowhere that went all in on making him suspicious.
And I love the way that scene ends. It's kind of a blink if you miss it line, but Shaggy's talking about how they have to get going, and he's like, we could stand here and do this all night, and by the looks of it, you would.
And then the ultimate topper of that moment, we've got to make like your personality and split. And I love that that's such a take on the whole red herring thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because he just goes 0 to 100.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the only thing that goes 0 to 100. I also have always loved the moment when all the monsters are like surrounding them and Shaggy's starting to freak out, so Scooby punches him.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about this joke is it goes from I needed that, and then he says, "You're pushing your luck, Scoob."
Mm-hmm.
I love how that goes 0 to 100.
Which is what you said when you were watching Scoob.
Yeah. That's exactly how I felt watching it. Through the whole thing. The great thing about that joke is that there's no middle.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have seen that joke before, hey, I needed that, and then they do it too much. Usually there's a middle portion where the person says, okay, and like, oh, that's enough, and then they break. Mm-hmm. I love how he goes straight from, I needed that to break it. Oh. What do you think about the scene when they're drinking all the potions?
It's weird.
Well, Well, first off, they pussied out on one of them.
Hmm.
Apparently, when he turns into Taz,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't that seem weirdly random?
Yeah.
Apparently, he was supposed to turn into the animated Scooby, like the cartoon Scooby.
That would have made more sense.
But I guess Warner Brothers got scared that they were going to be like, oh, but if they see the original Scooby, they're going to think ours looks like shit, and we don't want them comparing them. So they're like, all right, we'll do Taz then, because he's a property we have, I guess.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
And then there's the thing that became a meme. Shaggy and his giant built form. And I have to say, I know the meme is a thing, but the thing I took away from this was not only is it Shaggy gets dumber as the more built he is, but it's the way he's. I know it's a simple joke. I know.
Mm-hmm.
But just the way he says, check out my pets, little man. he becomes antagonistic about how built he is.
He even tries to destroy the potion to turn him back.
Oh, I love that. I don't know. I just kind of love that. It's yeah, like you said, it's weird, but it's kind of delightfully weird.
Mm.
It's the kind of weird we kind of want.
It's cartoony.
Yeah.
Like, could you not see something similar happening in the cartoon?
Yeah, maybe not to that extent, but something similar, yeah. Like the same kind of joke, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's what's weird is this one seems to understand the cartoon a lot better, and no players changed in the game.
Yeah, same writer, same director, all
Same
the same
cast.
It is a bizarre occurrence.
It is. It's like somebody had a light bulb and they're like, oh, I know how to send up the show now.
Yeah, or maybe the powers that be changed. It's kind of hard to tell, but...
Yeah, or it could have just been hey, the first review said this felt nothing like the show, so let's go overdrive into feeling like the show.
With all this said, do you think there is a point where the movie runs out of steam?
Oh, yeah.
I would say the clubhouse. Because the clubhouse has one great joke, but then I feel like everything apart from that joke with the clubhouse and then after, the movie is just kind of out of gas at that point.
What's the joke at the clubhouse that you like?
When we get the three of them working together,
mm-hmm.
and then Shaggy's just outside all sad going, man, they're in there having a montage without us.
Okay.
Because it's like, because you watch that scene, you're like, well, this is kind of cheesy. They're actually doing the montage thing, and it's whatever. And then they literally have a joke of Shaggy saying, they're montaging without us. Like, the montage is only there to set up that joke. And it's like, okay, I appreciate the montage now. But still, everything after that, it just kind of like, and I guess, like Malton said, it just is what it is at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But it gets weaker as it goes. It gets less funny. It gets more overblown.
Mm-hmm.
But there is one joke that is perfect. So perfect. So incredibly perfect because it's just a line on the side that builds up to this joke. This joke is so built up to, and we don't even realize it when it's happening. And then when the payoff gets there, it's like, ooh, stellar punchline. Stellar punchline. It's the rivalry between Peter Boyle and Tim Blake Nelson about how one of them got the lead in My Fair Lady that the other wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all they say, and you're like, oh, one of them wanted to play Henry Higgins and the other got to part. And you just don't think about that anymore. And then I think the My Fair Lady thing is brought up one more time, just to remind us that it's there. And then at the very end, as Tim Blake Nelson's being carried away, we realize that he was playing Eliza. A+ payoff. Oh. may be all I have to say about the second one. If you have any closing thoughts.
It's funny that the second one got the show so much more, but then in the first one they look more like they do in the show.
Yeah. Yeah, they did. They kind of all went through appearance changes here. We didn't even talk about the fact of Velma's transformation.
But I have a theory on that. We don't see any cell phones in these movies, correct?
Not that I remember.
What if they're supposed to be taking place at the time the cartoon is, and in the first one it's the end of the 60s, that's why they have a little bit better hair, like Fred's a little more trimmed and everything's a little more refined. The second one takes place further in the 70s, which is why we have the disco dancing scene at the faux ghost. Fred's hair grows out, insinuating that the 70s is nearing its middle area, and everything just feels more 70s like.
That feels too true. I'm trying to think if there's anything that contradicts that.
I mean, some of the technology, yes, but outside of that,
I'm sure cars probably contradicted at some point, but yeah, that seems to line up. Because at first I thought you were going to say something about, like, they're in present day, but they're, like, disillusioned and think they're in another decade. Yeah, the thing that's really selling me on this is the disco. It's like, why else would that be there?
And look at the way they dress.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, Shaggy's tux when they go to the museum at the beginning, that, like, is something I actually noticed. I was like, well, that's okay. That's just his fashion choice, I guess. But yeah, you may have something. I said, I'm sure it's contradicted somewhere, but that could just be a fuck up on there. That could just be a continuity fuck up on there.
And the van has carpet, and I'm pretty sure their little headquarters has shag carpet, I think.
Yeah. And yeah, with the cartoon being in that era, it all comes together.
And it explains the Don Knotts reference.
It would be a little dated in 2002. I mean, he was still around, but was he? I can't remember when we lost him. I'm pretty sure he was still around by then.
I think so. I don't think it's been I think it's been in the 2010s.
Yeah, 'cause it would have been only 4 years after Pleasantville.
I'll look it up while you're making your next point.
That maybe. I think the other thing we didn't. Oh yeah, a funny thing. Also, we were talking about. We didn't even bring up Velma's transformation. I do love that one bit, just because we're on the topic of her clothes, I guess. When she, like, I can't remember what happens now, but something happens that's like a downer for her. And I think it's when she thinks that Seth Green's behind it, and so just to show that this didn't work out for her, she unzips her like the tight dress and just pulls out the like neck of her sweater that's underneath it. And it's like such a depressing act from her.
It's like they took this sad moment and still snuck some comedy in there.
Yeah.
We lost Don Knotts in 2006.
That was about where I thought it might have been. All right. Yeah, so he could have been still relevant in 2002.
The second one even brings up something that doesn't happen in the first one at all, and that's Velma losing her glasses.
Yeah. All right. So, anything else to add?
Not that I can think of.
So pretty much our conclusion is we kind of prefer the second one.
What do you think of the reveal of Tim Blake Nelson, the mask within the mask?
That's pretty trippy. That's like
especially when Ned comes out and says that they cuddled.
Yeah. Which seems to not faze Tim Blake Nelson at all.
He says something, but I don't remember what he said.
Yeah, it's since we have Matthew Lillard here, you know what we can probably say?
Hmm.
Having a mask under the mask is kind of basically the equivalent of how big of a deal it was in Scream when it was the fact that there were two killers.
Yeah.
It's like there's two masks. Holy shit. Yeah. So is that is that about the extent of it?
I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I love the setup of what Peter Boyle's actually doing, where it's still sinister, but not what they're looking for.
Yeah, that's like a whole other thing. It almost feels like the Chris Cooper plot in the Muppets.
Yeah. But no, there's nothing else I can think of.
All right, this
It's
is
kind
usually
of
where
it's kind of weird because these movies work like a double time capsule. Like, especially the second one with the 70s, but then in itself is a time capsule of what people found popular in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
They're strange little films.
I said it's weird to think of how big of a deal they once were, and now they just exist amongst other movies.
Like I said, I think Freeform plays them during their like 31 days of Halloween or something.
All right, then we don't know what we're doing next, but we're gonna figure that out.
Yeah.
And we don't know if it's gonna be Friday or Monday, but it'll be one of those.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then we'll keep it. Like I said, my Stephen King series is almost over, and we're kind of somewhat back into.
I feel like you've been doing the Stephen King series forever.
Yeah, there's only one will have just come out, and then one's coming out right after this one, and after those two, there's only two left.
Mm.
And then
He's
I'll
had
be doing.
a lot of properties turned into movies.
Oh yeah, and I didn't even hit all of them. So I'll probably do his novellas at some point, and then that's a whole other can of worms.
Hmm.
But yeah, so until all that other stuff, I guess we're done here.
I'd say so.
All right.